I was 8 months pregnant when I realized I had never once chosen when to go to sleep. Not once. Not in 4 years of marriage. Not on a single night since I moved into that house with the white clapboard siding and the wood stove that ticked through the dark like a second heartbeat. The bedroom smelled of cedar and cold air that came through the window seam, and every night I stood beside the bed and waited. I waited for him to set down his Bible. I waited for the lamp to go out. I waited for the sound of his breathing to change, and then I lay down. That was the order. That was how it had always been. I did not think of it as waiting for permission. I thought of it as being a good wife, and I want to tell you that the demand he made, the one that broke something inside me, I have not fully repaired. I want to tell you it came out of nowhere, but it did not. It grew from the same soil as every quiet night I spent standing beside that bed. And if you stay with me, I think you will start to see the soil too, because you might recognize it. This channel exists for one reason. Women who lived inside systems they could not name while they were inside them. Their stories deserve to be heard out loud, in full, without interruption. If this is the first time you have found us, I am glad you are here. Subscribe, stay close, because these stories come out weekly and each one carries something that might belong to you. And if you are already listening and something in that opening made you pause, leave me a word in the comments. Just one word for what you were not allowed to choose. Sleep, food, clothing, silence, whatever it was. You do not have to explain it. The word alone is enough. I grew up 7 miles from the farm where I would become a wife. Our community sat in a valley in eastern Pennsylvania, where the roads turned to gravel past the gas station, and the fields opened up wide and flat and smelled of hay and turned earth depending on the season. I knew my husband before I married him, the way you know anyone in a community of 300. I knew his father's farm. I knew his family sat in the 3rd row during church service. I knew he had hands that were always clean, which was unusual for a man who worked with cattle. I did not know him, but I knew what he was, and what he was suitable. Our families agreed, the bishop agreed, and I agreed, because agreeing was the only verb I had been taught. We married in November. I was 19, he was 24. The ceremony was in his family's home. The furniture moved out and the benches moved in. And I remember the smell of cold pine and the weight of my new black shoes, and the way he looked at me once, quickly, before the vows. There was something gentle in it, something almost shy. I held that look inside me for years, the way you hold a coin you find in a field. You do not know its value yet, but it feels like it means something. He was not a cruel man. I need you to understand that before I tell you anything else. He brought me coffee on winter mornings without being asked. He carved a small wooden horse for the mantle because I had mentioned once, only once, that I missed the draft horses from my father's farm. He was kind in the way the community defined kindness, which is to say he provided. He did not raise his voice often, and he led. But leading in our community did not look the way it might in yours. Leading meant deciding. Every decision. What time dinner was served. Whether I could visit my sister on a Tuesday or a Thursday. Which fabric I used for my dress that season. Whether the lamp stayed on past 9. These were not discussions. They were not negotiations. They were quiet, settled things, delivered in a voice so calm it did not sound like authority. It sounded like weather, like something that simply was. And I moved inside it the way you move inside weather. You do not argue with January. You put on a coat. I put on the coat. Every day, I put on whatever coat the day required. I want to be honest about something. I did not feel trapped. I felt purposeful. I felt like I was doing what God had asked of me, and the structure of my days was proof that I was doing it well. Breakfast by 6, laundry started before 8, bread rising by 10, the house swept, the garden weeded, the mending folded and placed in the basket by the door before he came in from the barn. There was a rhythm to it that felt almost musical, and I was good at it. I was good at disappearing into the rhythm. The only thing I was not good at was the silence that came when the rhythm paused, the 5 minutes between tasks when I stood in the kitchen alone and felt something I did not have a name for. A kind of quiet that was not peaceful, a quiet that sat on my chest. I would pick up the broom or the washcloth and the feeling would pass. I learned to never stand still. There was one evening, about 2 years in, when the feeling did not pass. It was August, and the heat had been in the house all day, and I had spent the afternoon canning tomatoes. My hands were red. My back ached in a low, constant way. And when he came in and told me the elder's wife would be joining us for supper the next day, and that I should prepare the roast and not the stew because stew was not appropriate for hosting, something small inside me tightened. I did not argue. I did not even pause for long. But I said, quietly, I was thinking stew might be easier with the heat. He looked at me, not with anger, with something closer to confusion, the way you look at a clock that shows the wrong time. The roast, he said. And that was it. The roast. The elder's wife came the next evening. She complimented the meal. She sat across from me with her hands folded on her apron and told me I was blessed to have a husband who cared enough to guide the household. She said the word guide the way someone else might say breathe, like it was involuntary, natural, something you would never think to question. I nodded. I served the pie. I cleared the plates. And I did not mention the stew again. Not to him, not to her, not to myself. I folded that small tightness up like a dishcloth and put it away in the same place I put everything else I could not name. Somewhere between my ribs and my silence, in a drawer I did not know how to open. That was the architecture. That was the house my marriage lived in. Not violent, not loud, not the kind of thing you could point to and say, there, that is wrong. It was a house made of small, quiet rooms where every door opened only one way, and I was always on the side that waited for someone else to turn the handle. I did not see it as a house. I saw it as love. I saw it as faithfulness. I saw it as what every woman around me was living, because they were. Every woman I knew stood beside her bed at night and waited for the lamp to go out. And then, in the spring of my 4th year of marriage, I became pregnant. It was expected. It was celebrated. The community women brought me casseroles and advice and prayers, and my husband touched my shoulder one morning and said, "This is what we have been waiting for." I believed him. I put my hand on my stomach and I felt the first faint flutter of something moving inside me, and I thought, finally, I am doing the thing I was made to do. I did not know yet what the pregnancy would teach me. I did not know that the system I had learned to live inside would tighten around my body in ways I could feel in my bones. I did not know that the small, quiet demands that had built my marriage would grow louder and heavier and stranger, until one of them would land on me so hard I would not be able to breathe. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you what happened first. Let me tell you what it felt like when my body stopped being mine. The nausea came first, and it came like weather. Sudden, constant, without apology. I spent the first 3 months leaning over the kitchen sink at odd hours, gripping the porcelain edge, trying to keep my breathing even so I would not wake him. I did not want him to see me this way, not because he would be unkind, but because weakness had a specific meaning in our home. Weakness meant you were not managing well. Weakness meant something needed to be corrected, and I did not want to be corrected. I wanted to be left alone with my body for the first time in 4 years, just for a few minutes, just long enough to be sick in peace. But even the nausea was not private. His mother came by the second week and told me which tea to drink. The elder's wife sent word that I should rest on my left side, not my right, and my husband moved the rocking chair from the bedroom to the kitchen so I could sit while I cooked, which was kind, and which also meant he had decided how my body would rest, without asking my body what it needed. By the 4th month, the community had closed around my pregnancy the way a hand closes around a small bird. Gentle, careful, complete. Women I had known my whole life began appearing at the house with instructions wrapped in softness. How to eat, when to walk, how far to walk, which prayers to say for a healthy child, which tasks to stop doing and which to continue. None of them asked me what I wanted. None of them asked me how I felt. They told me what was right, and right had the weight of generations behind it, and I did not know how to stand against the weight of generations when I could barely stand against the weight of my own changing body. So I drank the tea. I lay on my left side. I sat in the rocking chair. I did everything I was told, and I told myself this was love, because what else could I call it when every instruction came wrapped in a voice that said, "We are taking care of you." There was an afternoon, I was 5 months along, when my husband came inside and told me the midwife had been chosen. Not a midwife, the midwife. A woman from a neighboring district, older, experienced, trusted by the bishop. He said her name and I nodded, because nodding was the shape my mouth had learned to make. But something cold moved through me. I had not been asked. I had not been consulted. I had not been told there were options, because there were no options, because the decision had already been made by him and the elders before I knew there was a decision to make. I sat at the kitchen table after he went back out, and I put both hands flat on the wood and I stared at the grain of it, the long, pale lines running in one direction, and I thought, I am having a baby. This is happening inside my body, and I just learned about it the way I learn about the weather. Someone told me what was already decided. I did not say this to anyone. I folded it up. I put it in the drawer. The 6th month was when the rules changed. Not all at once. Not in any way I could point to and say, here, this is where it shifted. But there was a weight in the house now that had not been there before. My husband began checking on me more frequently, not with tenderness, but with a kind of watchfulness, the way you check on bread in the oven. He asked if I had been resting. He asked what I had eaten. He asked if I had walked too far. And when I answered, he would nod or correct. And the correction was always small, always reasonable, always delivered in that calm voice that did not sound like control. You should not have carried that basket. You should eat before noon. The doctor is not necessary. Women have been doing this for thousands of years. That last one I heard more than once. The doctor is not necessary. My body knew what to do. The midwife would come when it was time. Everything else was vanity or fear or a lack of trust in God's design. By my 7th month, I had stopped sleeping through the night. The baby pressed against my ribs in a way that made breathing shallow, and I would lie in the dark and listen to the wood stove tick and feel the child move inside me like a question I could not answer. I started talking to the baby during the day, when the house was empty. Quietly. Just sounds, really, not words. I did not know what to say. I had never been taught how to talk to the thing living inside me. I had only been taught how to carry it correctly. But those moments, standing at the sink with my hands in warm water and the baby shifting under my ribs, those were the only minutes of the day that felt like they belonged to me. And even then, I was not sure. I was not sure anything belonged to me. The rocking chair. I need to tell you about the rocking chair. He had moved it into the kitchen as a kindness, and I sat in it every afternoon while the bread cooled on the counter and the light moved across the floor in long gold bars. But somewhere around my 7th month, the rocking chair stopped feeling like a gift and started feeling like an assignment. He would come in and look for me there. If I was standing, he would say, "Sit." If I was in the bedroom, he would ask why I was not in the kitchen. The chair had become a place I was expected to be, and the expectation had the same quiet, undeniable weight as every other rule in the house. I sat. I rocked. I watched the light move, and I thought about my mother, who had done this same thing in a different kitchen, with the same light and the same silence, and her mother before her, and I wondered if any of them had ever felt this low hum in their chest that was not pain and not sadness, but something closer to the sound a fence makes when the wind moves through it, a vibration you feel in your teeth. One afternoon, my neighbor Ruth came to help me with the canning. She was older than me by 12 years, married longer, 5 children. Her hands moved through the jars and lids with the kind of speed that comes from repetition so deep it lives in the muscles, not the mind. We did not talk much. We did not need to. The kitchen was warm, and the jars clinked, and the steam rose between us, and it was the closest thing to companionship I had felt in months. And then, without looking up, her hands still moving, Ruth said something that split the air in my kitchen like a crack in glass. She said, "My husband told me when to push." She said it the way you say the weather is cold. Factual. Unremarkable. She did not look up. Her hands kept moving. And I stood there with a jar lid in my fingers and the steam rising between us, and I understood, for the first time, what the system was building toward. Not just the meals, not just the rocking chair, not just the midwife chosen without my voice. The system was building toward the birth itself. The system intended to be in the room. The system intended to decide how my child came into the world, and my husband would be the one delivering that decision, the way he delivered every other one. Calmly, quietly, as though it were weather. Ruth sealed her jar. She wiped her hands on her apron. She asked if I had enough sugar for the next batch. If you know a woman whose body was managed by someone else's certainty, during pregnancy, during birth, during any moment when she was too exhausted or too trapped to fight, send her this video. Not with a message, just the link. She will understand. There is a part of those weeks I will not tell you about, not because I have forgotten it. I remember every hour. But some things happened in that house, between that kitchen and that bedroom, that belonged to the silence I have chosen, not the silence that was chosen for me. There is a difference between the two, and I have earned the right to know it. I will tell you this. By my 8th month, I could feel the architecture of my entire marriage pressing against my skin from the inside, the way the baby pressed against my ribs. I could feel every small demand, every quiet correction, every rule I had absorbed so deeply I had mistaken it for my own heartbeat. I did not know the word for what I was feeling. I did not know there was a word. I only knew that when I sat in that rocking chair and felt my child turn inside me, I was not thinking about the bread or the laundry or the midwife or the prayers. I was thinking, I do not know who is in charge of this body. I do not know if it is me. And then he came inside. The light was low. October. The fields had been cut and the air smelled of cold hay and wood smoke. He stood in the kitchen doorway with his hat in his hands and his boots still on, and he looked at me in the rocking chair with my hands on my belly, and he spoke in that same calm, certain voice he always used, the voice that sounded like weather. And then he told me what I was going to do. He said I would give birth at home. That was not the demand. Every woman in our community gave birth at home. He said the midwife would come when the time was right. That was not the demand either. He said I would not cry out. He said I would not make a sound during the labor. He said the birth of our child would be conducted in silence, in obedience, in surrender to God's design, and that any woman who screamed during labor was demonstrating a failure of faith. He said the bishop had spoken to him about it. He said his mother had done it silently. He said it was not a request. I sat in the rocking chair. The baby moved, the wood stove ticked, and I said yes. Not because I believed him, not because I thought he was right. I said yes because the word no had been removed from my vocabulary so slowly, over so many years, that by the time I needed it most, I could not find it. It was like reaching for a tool in a drawer and finding only empty space where the tool used to be. I knew it had existed once. I could feel the shape of where it had been, but my hand closed on nothing. He nodded. He hung his hat. He went to wash his hands for supper. And I stayed in that chair with both palms pressed flat against the place where my child was turning. And I felt something inside me go very still. Not the baby. The baby kept moving. Something else. Something behind my ribs that had been vibrating quietly for 4 years. That low hum I had never been able to name. It stopped. The fence went silent, and in its place there was nothing. Just a wide, flat, empty field with no sound in it at all. The weeks that followed were the quietest of my life, and I do not mean peaceful. I mean silent, the way a house is silent after something has fallen and broken, and no one has moved yet to pick up the pieces. I did my work, I cooked, I canned the last of the autumn tomatoes. I sat in the rocking chair when he came inside. I did everything the same, but something behind my eyes had shifted. I looked at the kitchen and I saw the kitchen. I looked at the rocking chair and I saw an assignment. I looked at my husband and I saw a man who believed, fully and without malice, that my pain was a spiritual test, and that my silence during the most overwhelming physical experience of my life was not cruelty, but correctness. He believed it the way he believed in sunrise. It was not something he had chosen. It was something that had been built into him by the same hands that built the benches in the church house, and the fences around the fields, and every quiet room I had ever stood inside, waiting for the handle to turn. The baby came on a Tuesday. Early morning, dark outside. I will not describe the labor in detail because some of it is mine to hold. But I will tell you this. I was silent. For hours, I was silent. I bit down on a folded cloth and I gripped the edge of the bed and I did not make a sound. Because the demand had become the architecture, and the architecture had become my body. And my body did not know how to disobey a structure it had lived inside for so long. The midwife was calm. My husband sat in the next room. And when my daughter was born, the first sound in that room was hers. Not mine, hers. She screamed the way newborns scream, with her whole self, with every part of her lungs and her throat and her brand new voice. And I held her against my chest, and I felt the silence I had kept for hours crack open like ice on a pond in March. Not dramatic, not loud, just a slow, spreading fracture that I could feel moving through me from my chest to my hands to the place behind my eyes where everything had shifted weeks before. I did not leave that night. I did not leave that month. I did not leave for another 14 months. And the leaving, when it came, was not a single door, but a series of small movements so gradual that even I did not recognize them as escape until I was standing in a parking lot in a town I had never been to, holding my daughter in one arm and a bag of clothing in the other, and realized I had no idea what to do next. But that is a different story. The one I need to finish is about the word. 3 years after I left, I was sitting in a small office with a woman named Dr. Linden. She had gray hair and a clock on her desk that did not tick, which I was grateful for. I had been seeing her for 6 weeks. I had told her about the marriage, the rocking chair, the meals, the elder's wife, Ruth, the midwife, the silence during labor. I had told her all of it in the same calm, measured voice I am using now, because that voice is the only one I have. The system taught me to speak this way, and I have not yet learned another way, and maybe I do not need to. And after I finished telling her about the demand, about the silence, about the night my daughter was born into a room where her mother was not allowed to make a sound, Dr. Linden put down her pen. She looked at me for a long time, and then she said, slowly, giving each word its own space, What you are describing is called coercive control. It means someone structured your entire reality so that obedience felt like your own idea. I did not speak. I sat in her office and I felt my hands go still in my lap. I felt the air change the way air changes before rain. A pressure shift, something opening. Because she had not just named the demand, she had named the rocking chair. She had named the roast instead of the stew. She had named every night I stood beside the bed and waited for the lamp. She had named the midwife I did not choose, and the silence I did not break, and the word no that had been removed from my mouth so carefully I had not felt it go. She had given one phrase to the entire architecture, and the architecture, for the first time in my life, had walls I could see from the outside. I had been living inside something that had a name, and the name meant it was not just mine. It meant Ruth had lived in it too, and his mother, and the elder's wife, and every woman who had ever stood in a kitchen in that valley and felt the hum in her chest and folded it up and put it in a drawer she did not know how to open. I do not hate my community. I need to say that clearly, the way I say everything, once, and without performance. There was beauty in that valley, the way the morning light came through the kitchen window in winter, the smell of bread rising, the sound of horses in the field at dusk, the sincerity of the prayers, even the ones I no longer believe. I did not leave because I hated it. I left because I loved too much of it to survive the parts that were killing me quietly, the way frost kills a garden, not with violence but with patience, one night at a time, until the thing that was growing simply stops. And now I want to talk to you. Not the version of you that clicked on this video out of curiosity about the Amish. The other one. The one who is lying in bed right now, or sitting in her car, or folding laundry in a house that is quiet in a way that is not peaceful. You did not click because of me. You clicked because something in that title, his hardest demand, landed on a place inside you that already hurt. Because someone in your life made a demand of you that you were not allowed to call a demand. It was called love. It was called leadership. It was called protection. It was called faith. And you obeyed it, not because you were weak, but because the architecture was so complete that obedience felt like breathing. If you have never been given the word for what happened to you, I want you to hear me. You were not broken. You were built into a structure that was designed to make you invisible to yourself. And the fact that you are here, listening, at this hour, in this silence, that is not weakness. That is the first sound. That is your voice. The one they told you was not necessary, reaching toward a word it has not found yet. You will find it. It will come slowly, the way spring comes after a long frost. And when it arrives, you will not scream. You will just say it, once, in your own voice, and the architecture will not survive the sound. My daughter is 6 now. She is loud. She is so loud. She argues with me about breakfast and slams doors when she is angry and sings in the car with the windows down. And every single sound she makes is a sound I was not allowed to make in the room where she was born. I did not give her that voice. She was born with it. I just made sure no one took it from her. And if that is all I ever do, it is enough. Tell me in the comments, was there ever a demand someone made of you that you did not recognize as unreasonable until years later? You do not have to name it. You do not have to explain. Just say, I remember. That is enough. I will hear you.